Tonight, the brutal killings rocking Hollywood. The son of legendary director Rob Reiner in court for the first time, facing murder charges after the grisly deaths of his parents. Newly obtained surveillance footage shows 32-year-old Nick Reiner inside a store the night of the killings. Police cars swarming him moments later. A reporter at the courthouse pressing his defense lawyer, and the couple's other children describing the, quote, unimaginable pain they're in every moment of the day. Also breaking tonight, the FBI Deputy Director stepping down. Why Dan Bongino is leaving less than a year into the role. And breaking moments ago, the U.S. government taking responsibility for the deadly crash over the Potomac between a military Black Hawk helicopter and the American Airlines commercial jet. What it means for the victims' families. Security questions growing on Brown University's campus after that terrifying mass shooting. Police releasing a new image tonight of a man they say could have critical information. New backlash over that candid interview with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. We speak with the Vanity Fair writer about how he got that rare access and if he'll release audio as the Trump administration fires back. Dangerous discovery. Razor blades found inside loaves of bread at Walmart. The woman now in police custody. And startling video of a woman kicked by a camel during a Christmas performance. How she's doing tonight. Plus, President Trump set to address the nation in a couple of hours, what he's expected to say in his rare primetime speech. Top story starts right now. And good evening. I'm Ellison Barber in for Tom. We begin tonight with those new images of Nick Reiner's arrest as the son accused of murdering his parents, Michelle and Rob Reiner, makes his first appearance in court. New surveillance video shows the 32-year-old inside a gas station convenience store the same night his parents were killed. You can see Nick Reiner in the striped shirt there buying a drink. Moments later, multiple police cars surrounding him as he's arrested and taken into custody. This was the scene inside the courtroom today. Reiner not on camera, but seen by our reporters wearing a blue vest and handcuffed. His arraignment pushed back until January 7th. And for the first time tonight, we are hearing from the Reiner's other two children, Jake and Romy Reiner, saying in part, the horrific and devastating loss of our parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, is something that no one should ever experience. The tributes from Hollywood legends continue to pour in. A letter from the couple's close friends, including Billy Crystal and Larry David, reading in part, they were a special force together, dynamic, unselfish, and inspiring. We were their friends, and we will miss them forever. Our Morgan Chesky leads us off once again tonight from L.A.
Tonight, new video capturing the moment Nick Reiner was taken into custody. The murder suspect seen raising his hands as LAPD moved in, cuffing him less than 6 hours after police discovered the bodies of his father, Rob, and mother, Michelle. A medical examiner's report confirming tonight both died from multiple sharp force injuries. NBC News also obtaining this surveillance video showing Reiner enter a gas station just before his arrest. He buys a drink and walks away alone. The 32-year-old now charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. At the courthouse this morning, anticipation ahead of Reiner's first court appearance.
Has he passed the medical clearance today?
We expect him to be here today, yeah.
The judge ruling Reiner could not be shown on camera, so he sat in a corner, shackled and wearing a protective smock, only uttering 3 words in response to the judge.
Do you waive your right to a speedy arraignment?
During the brief hearing, the judge granting Reiner's request to push his arraignment to next month. His lawyer later sharing this message to the family.
Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family.
And cautioning against a rush to judgment.
There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case.
Meanwhile, tonight, 2 of the Reiner's adult children are breaking their silence. Jake and Romy Reiner writing in a statement, words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day. Adding, they weren't just our parents, they were our best friends.
And Morgan Chesky joins us now from Los Angeles. Morgan, we mentioned briefly what we heard from some of the Reiner's closest friends. Can you tell us what more they had to say?
Yeah, Ellison, we're also hearing from Meg Ryan, the star of Reiner's hit film When Harry Met Sally. She took to Instagram earlier today, posting this tribute, showing her dancing with Reiner from many years ago and sharing a message that reads in part, Thank you, Rob and Michelle, for the way you believe in true love, in fairy tales, and in laughter. Thank you for your faith in the best in people and for your profound love of our country. As for Nick Reiner, Ellison, he will remain behind bars, held without bail. His next court date now slated for January 7th of next year. Ellison.
Morgan Chesky, thank you. Now to that breaking news at the Federal Bureau of Investigations. The second in command, Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, announcing he is stepping down after just 9 months on the job. Bongino is a former Secret Service agent and police officer who became a conservative podcaster before joining the Trump administration earlier this year. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell joins us now from Washington. Kelly, President Trump reacting to this news tonight.
This shakeup is a high-profile move out of the Department of Justice. The president did talk about it today, saying Bongino did a great job and that he wants to return to his show, referring to the podcast you mentioned. Also, the Attorney General is saying America is safer because Bongino was on the task. And Director Kash Patel, in a lengthy post, talked about Bongino completing his mission, and he listed a number of things he was working on. From what we understand, Bongino says through a post he made today that he'll leave in January. His family has remained in Florida during his time in public service. One of the notable things about him as the deputy director of the FBI, in the modern era, no one had held that post who had not come from the Bureau. As you mentioned, he had been a Secret Service agent, a New York City cop, but he'd never been a part of the Bureau. And in fact, he'd often been an outspoken critic of the Bureau, and certainly Kash Patel has been critical about the former leadership, and he talked about Bongino helping him to bring transparency and to change the Bureau.
And Kelly, NBC News previously reported that Bongino had considered resigning earlier this year after the FBI and DOJ completed the review of the Epstein files and announced no other charges would be filed in that case. Do we know if that had a factor here?
Well, our team has been tracking those tensions for a period of months, and back over the summer, it was clear that Bongino had very strong feelings about that. There were some clashes with leadership at DOJ after that determination was made that there would not be a release of the Epstein files and there would not be prosecution. Much has changed since then. The government is facing a deadline of this Friday to release the Epstein files based on Congress acting. We don't know if that is the direct impact, but I can also point out that he was very involved in the D.C. pipe bomber case. And you may recall that in just the last few weeks, there had been an arrest after 5 years on that case of the person who had believed to have planted 2 pipe bombs the night before January 6th back in 2021. So that is something that he can claim as a piece of his sort of portfolio that was accomplished. It's a short time in a job as prominent as this, and if he goes back to being outside of the government in a podcaster role, he can go back to something that he has talked about, that there he was paid for opinions. During his time at the FBI, he had said that he had to deal with facts. That reflecting on the fact there were times Bongino was very critical of the FBI when he was outside government and then approached it differently when he was in the role. Ellison?
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you. President Trump addressing the nation tonight amid heightened tensions with Venezuela and poll numbers showing the majority of Americans are dissatisfied with his handling of the economy. NBC's chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has more.
Tonight, President Trump is set to deliver a critical primetime address where he's expected to make the case for his pressure campaign on Venezuela's authoritarian leader Nicolas Maduro. The Venezuelan government has ordered its Navy to escort oil tankers from its ports, according to the New York Times, citing 3 people familiar with the matter, after President Trump announced a blockade of sanctioned oil tankers.
Just a blockade. Not going to let anybody going through that shouldn't be going through.
It comes days after U.S. forces, in a move approved by a federal judge, seized a massive tanker it says was carrying sanctioned oil, and amid months of U.S. strikes on suspected drug boats, killing nearly 100 people, part of the president's crackdown on cartels. But the president's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, recently contradicted the president, telling Vanity Fair President Trump would need congressional approval for any land strikes in Venezuela, which the president has said is not required. President Trump's aides say he will use tonight's speech to tout his accomplishments, including the ceasefire in Gaza and the record drop in illegal border crossings.
We took the worst border in the history of our country, and in a period of 2 months, We turned it into the strongest border in the history of our country.
He'll also take on Americans' concerns about the economy, with the most recent NBC News poll showing 2/3 of voters are dissatisfied with his handling of inflation and the cost of living. Since the president returned to office, ground beef has gone up 14%, coffee rising 15%, in part due to the president's tariffs. Still, gas prices have dropped below $3 a gallon for the first time in more than 4 years.
And Peter joins us now from the White House. Peter, the White House installing plaques on the exterior of the building featuring President Trump's predecessors. Can you tell us more?
Ellison, that's right. Politics have, of course, always dwelled in the White House, most often in words, but not in public displays criticizing predecessors. That has changed months after President Trump remade the famed West Wing colonnade into what he calls the Presidential Walk of Fame, with images of each of his predecessors. The president just added those plaques you see beneath each of them, some of them with overtly partisan, even blatantly false descriptions. The plaque beneath the portrait of an auto pen that stands in place for President Biden begins, "Sleepy Joe Biden was by far the worst president in American history." It refers to Barack Obama as Barack Hussein Obama, the former president, calls the nation's first black president one of the most divisive figures in American history. Ellison, this is really the latest example of the president putting his spin on history, and in this case, really his fingerprints on the People's House, from tearing down the East Wing for a massive ballroom to tearing up the Rose Garden for a Mar-a-Lago-like patio. The Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski saying tonight that she's disturbed by it. She said it's not President Trump's house where he can just say what he wants to say on the property of the People's House. Ellison.
Peter Alexander on the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you. And you can watch President Trump's address to the nation tonight on NBC News Now and on NBC starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. Okay, we are following more breaking news out of Washington tonight. The U.S. government now taking responsibility for the deadly crash between a Black Hawk helicopter and an American Airlines commercial jet last January over the Potomac River. Tom Costello joins us now with the late-breaking details. Tom, what more do we know?
Ellison, really a striking 209-page court filing this afternoon. And in it, the United States government, as you said, takes full responsibility for this crash that happened last January in which 67 people died. I'm going to read you some of the highlights here. The language is really quite striking. It says here the defendants' collective failures, the defendants being the United States government and also, they say, American Eagle Airlines. The defendants' collective failures caused the mid-air collision that resulted in the senseless, tragic deaths of 67 people. The government goes on to say this mid-air collision was tragically an accident waiting to happen. It says the defendants, again, that's the government, it's the air traffic controllers, it's also the military. The defendants utterly failed in their responsibilities to the traveling public, specifically including the passengers on board that American Eagle flight. It says the United States Army flight crew, the Black Hawk pilots, in other words, failed to properly and adequately operate the Black Hawk helicopter, including their failure to see and avoid the American Eagle plane. The Black Hawk flight crew critically failed to resolve a known and discussed altitude discrepancy in that chopper, despite transitioning airspace that they knew about. And here's a very striking line here from this court filing. The United States admits that the pilots and the American Eagle pilots failed to maintain vigilance so as to see and avoid each other. Keeping in mind, the United States government does not speak for American Airlines. Nonetheless, it says also that air traffic control failed. And because of the pilots from the chopper failing to maintain vigilance to see and avoid the American Eagle plane, the United States is liable to a plaintiff who is legally eligible to recover certain monetary damages as permitted by court. The plaintiff is the families, or are the families, and the survivors, the surviving family members of those who died. So the United States is saying right up front, guilty. We admit that we failed, the controllers failed, the pilots failed as well. And by the way, the FAA regulatory body failed to see all of the evidence of a whole bunch of near misses, dozens of near misses in the skies over Reagan Airport. And so the United States says that, in fact, the plaintiffs, the families of the 67 who died, are due monetary damages. Really a striking admission. But, Ellison, I would make the point, most of this we knew. Right? The NTSB's preliminary findings have already found a lot of this information I just told you about. The FAA and the DOT have already said that the controllers failed that night. And the military has also conceded failures with the Black Hawk crew. So it would be hard for them to win a court case when the government has already admitted to all of this in various hearings.
Excellent reporting on that breaking news there. Tom Costello, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Next tonight, the last-minute twist in the healthcare standoff on Capitol Hill. 4 Republicans defying party leadership and joining Democrats to force a vote on a 3-year extension of enhanced Obamacare subsidies that expire at the end of the year. NBC's Ryan Nobles is following all of it and joins us now from the Hill. So, Ryan, as we've been reporting, those subsidies expire at the end of the year, meaning premiums will skyrocket for millions of Americans. But this vote to extend those Affordable Care Act subsidies, it will happen after lawmakers are back from the holiday break, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Allison. In fact, Republicans did pass a health care bill today in the House of Representatives that is designed to bring down the overall cost of health care. But those premium subsidy extensions were not part of this package. Instead, what we saw was 4 Republican lawmakers break with the rest of their party and the Speaker of the House to join Democrats in signing what's called a discharge petition that will force a vote on a 3-year extension of those subsidies. Now, the Speaker has 7 legislative days to bring that legislation to the floor. But here's the catch. The House is leaving for the holiday break tomorrow. So that means that calendar, that clock won't start ticking until into the new year. But there is some optimism among those who would like to see these extension of these premium subsidies. They believe the fact that the House will vote on this, the fact that it will pass, will open the door to substantive negotiations in the Senate in January. The problem, though, is if you're one of those 22 million Americans who benefit from these premium subsidies, those are going to expire at the end of the year. So at least there's going to be some period of time where millions of Americans are going to see their premiums skyrocket. Ellison?
Ryan Nobles, thank you. The growing outrage at Brown University as the search for a person of interest intensifies. Authorities releasing a new image of an individual they say could have relevant information to the investigation. NBC's Erin McLaughlin is on the scene.
Tonight in Providence, Rhode Island, police released these images. You see a person dressed in a jacket and hoodie. Authorities say the individual was in proximity of the person of interest.
All we know is that that person was in the vicinity of the subject that we have an interest in, and we want to speak with them.
Both now at the center of the investigation into the deadly mass shooting at Brown University. Today, police also released this color-coded map based on surveillance footage. It shows the confirmed locations of the person of interest. You see the engineering hall where the attack happened here.
He will be caught, and it's just a matter of time before we catch him.
This amid growing concern about campus security. Overnight, President Trump joined the calls for accountability, questioning the lack of surveillance cameras inside the prestigious Ivy League building. Today, Brown released this statement, pointing to the university's expansive network of security cameras. But authorities acknowledge a critical gap.
There weren't a lot of cameras in that older part of that Brown engineering building.
Tom pressed Providence Mayor Brett Smiley earlier this week.
This is Brown University, an Ivy League school, one of the greatest schools in the country. How was somebody able to access that building and kill 2 students, injure 9 others in this day and age?
So, Brown University is a little bit unique from other universities, and it's something that I think is beautiful, which is it's an open campus integrated with the neighborhood.
I think if I could describe him in one word, it would be magnetic.
Friends of victim Mohammed Aziz Emirzakov say the campus needs to change its approach to safety.
I do think it would be a good idea for them to implement some stricter security measures to prevent something like this from happening again.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sad reality to have to sit with at 18 years old.
Yeah.
And Erin joins us now from Providence, Rhode Island. Erin, there's also questions about the campus siren system.
Yeah, that's right, Ellison. The campus has a siren system, a series of 3 sirens designed to go off in the event of a major emergency. And yet on that day, the sirens did not sound. Lots of questions as to why. The university president explaining that they chose not to turn on that system because it would have sent the students rushing back into the building toward an active shooter. So instead, they used this text and email alert system, sending out text messages to 20,000 people on campus. That said, the university today in that statement saying they're going to do a system-wide review of the security arrangements on campus. Ellison.
Erin McLaughlin, thank you. For more, let's bring in Providence Chief of Police, Colonel Oscar Perez. Colonel Perez, thank you for joining Top Story again tonight. It has been 4 days now since this shooting. We still do not have a clear image of the suspect. And of course, no one is in custody. Where do things stand right now? Are you any closer to finding this killer?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. And yeah, every day we're gathering new evidence. Every day we're coming up with progress. I feel very confident that the men and women of this department, along with our partners, federal partners, are going to get the answers and find this person and hold them accountable for his actions. Personally, as a father, personally as a police officer, my goal is to ensure that I get answers for these families. My heart goes out to them. I've had my own children who graduated from colleges, and I don't think that I would want that type of call. And so I'll tell you that I have responsibility to ensure that these individuals found, and I can't wait for the Providence Police Department to put handcuffs on them.
Take us through what you want viewers to pay attention to in the images that have already been released of this suspect. Is it the way he walks? Is it hand movements, body shape? You also released new images this afternoon of someone you say was in proximity to the person of interest. Can you tell us anything more about who you believe that person is or what you think they might know?
So yeah, the first image that we sent released this past few days. Obviously, we don't have a clear picture of the face, but we do have those body movements, which is a certain pattern of movements, like the way the person carry their weight, the way they swing their arms. And those items, I think those physical features, I think, is what could help somebody recognize this individual. As far as the second person that we released today, I think that knowing through video footage that we observed them in the same vicinity as this person of interest in this some sort of movement and events between the two of them, I think it will be really critical for our investigation to find out why this person was there, and that person could provide some relevant information to this investigation, and we're looking forward to that.
And at this point, do you believe your suspect, the shooter, is still in the state?
Again, those are unknown answers, but I do know that we are strongly every day coming up with new information.
Okay.
As we speak, before I sat down for this interview, we're constantly looking at new video footage is coming. So I'm pretty hopeful that I know we're going to find this person. I got full faith in this department, and I got full faith in the federal partners that are working with us. I'll tell you, in 32 years of service, I never thought that this would happen in the capital city of Providence, but I am proud to say that I know what teamwork is. In this profession, everyone that puts a uniform on in this country, our goal is to be able to put handcuffs on someone that decides to commit this type of tragedy in a neighborhood. So,
all right, Providence Chief of Police Colonel Oscar Perez, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another campus is in mourning tonight after the shocking murder of a beloved professor. MIT students grieving after a nuclear scientist was gunned down in his own home. Right now, the killer is still on the loose. NBC's Sam Brock has the details on where that investigation stands.
Tonight, the mystery and heartache hanging over MIT's campus.
So tragic, so frightening, so insane.
After world-renowned professor Nuno Loureiro, the head of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, was gunned down in the entrance to his building.
Reported gunshots. Father was shot multiple times.
48 hours later, the search for his killer intensifying. The 47-year-old physicist killed in the upscale Boston suburb of Brookline was a father of 3 daughters and a brilliant researcher, according to Bruno Gonçalves, who worked with Loureiro for years in Portugal.
How would you describe the level of shock and devastation in the scientific community when this news was learned?
Well, everyone was extremely shocked by the violence of the event, shocked because he was a really nice person.
Brookline police referring NBC News to the Norfolk County DA's office, which said in a statement, this is an active and ongoing homicide investigation. No further information is being released at this time. While 50 miles away in Providence, authorities knocking down any notion that there could be a link to the tragedy at Brown. The investigating agencies have not yet responded to NBC News' request for information about a possible motive, as Gonzalez just wants clarity.
We need to make justice, but also we need to understand what was behind such an attack and the motivations, because if the motivations was related with the type of work that we are doing, then it's a really concern for the whole community.
Sam Brock joins us now in studio. Sam, what has the reaction been on the ground there?
The people, Ellison, who live in this community, whether it's neighbors, residents, journalists even, are apoplectic at the lack of information they are getting from police right now. Consider the fact that this professor was shot in the foyer of his apartment building multiple times, right? And they don't know, was this a robbery? Was it a crime of opportunity? Was it a vendetta? Was it because of the line of work that he does? We know nothing about that. While at the same time, 48 hours earlier, there was a shooting on Brown University. Authorities have said these two things are not connected, but you have people in an absolute frenzy over there. And now you're talking about the Boston area. And once again, people are freaking out, trying to grasp what sort of details led up to this, and they have nothing. And so the bottom line is they want more information from law enforcement right now. If they have it, they're not sharing the information.
All right, Sam Brock, thank you.
Thanks.
Right now, hurricane-force winds slamming several states out west, knocking out power to hundreds of thousands of people. Take a live look at the highway just outside of Boulder, Colorado. Winds there at one point reaching 90 miles per hour, and officials say 911 calls are surging. In Oregon, destructive winds sending this trampoline flying right into a utility pole. Dozens of trees ripped down in Mount Hood National Forest, completely cutting off roads. Let's get right to NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns for the latest. Bill, this is a dangerous situation unfolding right now. Walk us through what you're seeing.
Ellison, this is a windstorm unlike we've seen in a long time. And we had numerous wind gusts between 90 to 100 miles per hour in Colorado, Wyoming, many in the 70-mile-per-hour range in Montana. High wind warnings continue from Montana all the way out into the plains. The highest winds now are heading from Colorado into Nebraska, South Dakota, and eventually here into Kansas. We expect winds tonight. It'll be shaking when you're trying to go to sleep from Bismarck southwards all the way through the 50-mile-per-hour range, 40s when we get towards Kansas City. This storm will arrive on the East Coast Friday morning, and we will see some pretty high winds, especially coastal areas like Nantucket could gust into the 50s, 40s from New York all the way down to Boston, included in that. D.C. more like in the 30-mile-per-hour range. And while all this is going on, another huge storm is on its way into the west. This will arrive tomorrow. Additional flooding is possible. Southern portions of Washington state, Oregon, you're going to be the target zone this time. Some areas could see between 3 to 5 inches of rain, and this will just be our latest in the series of storms for the West Coast, Ellison. They can't catch a break.
Bill Cairns, thank you. We are back in a moment with the terrifying incidents at a pair of Walmarts in Mississippi. A woman arrested after allegedly putting razor blades inside loaves of bread. What we're learning tonight. Welcome back. The warning from police after razor blades and a fishhook were found in bread bought at Walmart stores in Mississippi. NBC's Jesse Kirsch has the video and more on the woman who police say is responsible.
This is about the last thing you'd want to see in your groceries, a razor blade sticking out of a loaf of bread. But police say that's exactly what Walmart discovered repeatedly this month in Biloxi, Mississippi.
We just have no way of knowing how many loaves of bread or items in the bakery were tampered with to begin with, and how many may have been sold, and over the course of what amount of time.
According to investigators, on December 5th, a customer reported finding a razor blade in a muffin from a Walmart supercenter. Then 3 days later, police say another customer found a razor blade in a loaf of bread bought from a separate Walmart store.
And then it was when there was a third report at the supercenter on December 14th, where they were like, hey, this might be something.
Investigators say surveillance video led them to this woman, 33-year-old Camille Benson, who's now charged with attempted mayhem. Her motive unclear. NBC News has not been able to reach Benson for comment. In a statement, Walmart writing, "We have removed and thoroughly inspected all potentially affected products at impacted stores in Biloxi," adding customers should throw out any tampered products and visit Walmart for a refund. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
Back now with Top Stories news feed, starting with President Trump paying respects today to the 2 Iowa National Guardsmen and interpreter killed in Syria as they prepared to return home. He met privately with the families at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware before their dignified transfer. That's a ritual conducted in honor of U.S. service members killed in action. The interpreter was also included in the transfer. A small plane crashing near a condo complex in New Hampshire, leaving a pilot injured. Here you can see the aftermath with the plane flipped upside down. The FAA says the crash happened shortly after takeoff. Police reporting the only person inside the aircraft was that pilot, who was taken to the hospital. Video appeared to show some damage to a home, but authorities did not confirm whether the plane struck any buildings. And shocking video of a camel kicking a woman during a recent Christmas performance at a packed church in the Houston area. Take a look at this. You can see the camel walking down the aisle when it suddenly kicks its back leg. Our NBC affiliate there reports crews took the woman to the hospital, but she has now been released. Church officials say they are in contact with her and that they regret the incident. Americans feeling lucky will get another crack tonight at that massive Powerball jackpot. It's now up to more than $1.2 billion, the second largest grand prize this year. The estimated total cash value is about $570 million. The drawing is set for just before 11 p.m. Eastern. And President Trump is expected to sign an executive order as soon as this week that would begin the process of reclassifying cannabis as a drug. Right now, it's in a category that includes heroin, but that could change, and the implications, those could be major. NBC's Julie Sirkin explains.
President Trump tonight on the verge of signing an executive order that would change the future of cannabis in the United States. 4 sources tell NBC News the EO would fast-track the rescheduling of marijuana, moving it into a category with lower-risk drugs.
A lot of people want to see it, the reclassification, because it leads to tremendous amounts of research that can't be done unless you reclassify.
Since 1970, the drug has been listed as a Schedule I substance in the same category as heroin and LSD. The current classification considers it more dangerous than fentanyl, the primary driver of drug overdose deaths. The president's order would direct the Drug Enforcement Administration to reclassify cannabis as a Schedule III drug, the same category as some Tylenol. With this move, the government would acknowledge marijuana's potential medical benefits for the first time, even though 47 states already allow cannabis use for medical reasons.
Directing my cabinet to review the federal classification of marijuana.
The rescheduling process began under President Biden and has stalled earlier this year due to administrative delays. But President Trump is poised to turn a campaign promise into a reality. Once the rescheduling process is complete, the Food and Drug Administration will be able to study cannabis for medical and scientific purposes. The move could eventually mean that cannabis will be sold at pharmacies. Within President Trump's own party, not everyone is on board.
I joined Senator Budd and a number of other Republican senators expressing our reservations about doing that.
Rescheduling marijuana does not mean it will be legal at the federal level. And it won't help the tens of thousands still sitting behind bars for nonviolent cannabis offenses.
It's awfully hard to have people all over the jails that are in jail right now for something that's legal.
Robert Deals, a retired Air Force veteran, has been in prison for the last 15 years.
Him and some associates were offered cannabis by undercover officers. He attempted to flee in this and was given 18 years and charged with possession and intent to sell.
His daughter Alicia says she's grateful for the step forward.
But we truly have to acknowledge the true harm that's been done and how much more we have to do.
The war on drugs, she says.
It was a war on minority communities.
Today, Alicia and her family own a legal dispensary in Arizona.
We have turned burdens into blessings. We are flourishing in the business. But it's something, a very, very bittersweet win. My father is still incarcerated.
And Julie Sirkin joins us now from Capitol Hill. Julie, as you mentioned there, this is a step, just a step toward reclassification. How long could all of it take, and what else could this order include?
Yeah, it's just a step, Allison, but it's such an important one. We talked about the long, drawn-out process that started under then-President Biden, what this executive order would do, which I'm told just a couple of minutes ago that the president is expected to sign it tomorrow afternoon, so that would be huge, although, of course, the timing could always shift. This order would essentially fast-track the rescheduling process. Pam Bondi or the DEA administrator would have to sign off, and then we could see action happen pretty quickly. Of course, everything is bureaucratic, but if and when it's finally signed off on by the AG or the DEA administrator, that means the FDA would soon be allowed to start researching cannabis for medical and scientific reasons. You also asked me what else we could see in this EO. I heard quite a few things. The most important one that members of Congress in my usual post are paying attention to is the Safer Banking Act. It's legislation I've been tracking for years. It's bipartisan. It has passed in the Senate before and then went nowhere in the House. It would unlock banking and financial institutions and access to major banking institutions for legal cannabis businesses. And for people who buy cannabis at those legal cannabis businesses, it means they might be able to pay for it with a credit card. So big things happening with this EO. Of course, we'll see it when it's finally rolled out as soon as tomorrow, but certainly a monumental step and a huge one, I might add, coming from a Republican president. Allison?
Julie Sirkin in D.C., thank you. Now to that remarkably revealing interview with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. The Vanity Fair piece titled Susie Wiles, J.D. Vance and the Junkyard Dogs, the White House Chief of Staff on Trump's second term, is a series of interviews with Susie Wiles, who speaks candidly about her boss and his administration. The president's top advisor, who he has referred to at times as Susie Trump, served as Trump's 2024 presidential campaign manager and was largely credited with his successful bid for a second term. The first woman to serve as White House Chief of Staff did not hold back when asked about President Trump targeting perceived political enemies. She told Vanity Fair, quote, "I don't think he wakes up thinking about retribution, but when there's an opportunity, he will go for it." She also described President Trump, who does not drink, as having an alcoholic's personality, also commenting on members of the president's cabinet, referring to Vice President J.D. Vance as a conspiracy theorist for a decade. The president defending Wiles' comments, telling the New York Times, or the New York Post, rather, in an interview that he does have a possessive and addictive type personality, adding, quote, "I'm fortunate I'm not a drinker." And Wiles harshly criticizing the publication on X, calling the report a disingenuously framed hit piece on me and the finest president, White House staff, and cabinet in history. We are joined now by the reporter behind that headline-making piece, Vanity Fair's Chris Whipple. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Top Story. I mean, let's just start with how this came to be. I mean, this is an administration that often tends to prioritize speaking with quote-unquote friendly outlets, friendly reporters or media figures. How did you get this access, and how many times did you talk to Susie?
Well, not only that, but as you well know, Susie Wiles is famous for being under the radar, off camera, rarely giving interviews. So it was really a remarkable experience. It began in January, almost a year ago, that we began to talk. We talked about the campaign that she had just led for President Trump, that Against All Odds campaign. It quickly became apparent to me that she really wanted to talk about Trump 2.0, the second term. And so we talked about that. And shortly thereafter, I told her that Vanity Fair wanted to publish the piece. She was all in from the get-go. And everything, nearly everything was on the record, except when we explicitly agreed otherwise. And it's just remarkable how candid and kind of unscripted she was.
I mean, it is the thing everyone is talking about because there is so much there. It's also so rare to hear from her, as you said. I want to play a little bit of what we heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt when she was asked yesterday about this interview, and then we'll get your reaction on the other side.
Sure.
Let's listen.
This is, unfortunately, another example of disingenuous reporting, where you have a reporter who took the chief of staff's words wildly out of context, did not include the context those conversations were had within. And then further, I think the most egregious part of this article was the bias of omission that was clearly present.
What do you make of that and the reaction?
Well, you know, what's notable about that is what she didn't say. Neither she nor the White House nor Susie Wiles has challenged a single statement, a single assertion or quotation in the piece. It's a 9,500-word piece full of interesting material behind closed doors. material. And frankly, I think there's actually lots of positive things about Susie Wiles that I reported on. This is a very different White House from Trump 1.0. It's a better run White House. But look, there are a lot of crises, and we talked about all of them, from the blanket pardon of the January 6th insurrectionist, which Susie Wiles tried to tap the brakes on, all the way to revenge and retribution and the prosecution of his political enemies, and especially Letitia James. And what was really remarkable is that Susie Wiles conceded that that was a case of retribution, and it's practically a get-out-of-jail-free card for Letitia James's attorneys. If you ask me, I'm not an attorney, but...
You mentioned that they haven't criticized exactly what was said. They keep saying that the context is missing or that it is disingenuous. When you hear comments like that, and we've heard repeatedly, even Susie Wiles has said it's missing context. Is there more context? I mean, are there audio tapes or transcripts you would consider releasing?
Here's what I would say to young reporters who are just starting to cover the White House. When you start hearing words like context and disingenuous and framing, you know that you've done your job. What it means is that they can't talk about any mistakes. What it means is that they know that the piece is accurate. And as I say, it was 9,500 words, plenty of context galore.
So is there a world where you would release I assume there's audio recordings of some of the on-the-record interviews, as most journalists have. Would you consider releasing those just to say, take it off the table?
Well, no, that's above my pay grade. I mean, that wouldn't be my decision. But no, ordinarily, as you well know, as a reporter, you wouldn't release your raw notes, which is what the tapes are.
Let me ask you, when you think about some of the quotes we didn't even touch on, some of the comments she made about Venezuela, right, saying that Trump wants to keep pressure on President Maduro. She told you, quote, he wants to keep on blowing up boats until Maduro cries uncle. Given the news we saw last night and the announcement of this blockade, is there context in that or just information that you are now looking at the totality of what you've reported and saying, oh, this is extra relevant? What should we make of those comments in conjunction with the activity we're seeing in Venezuela?
Well, really remarkable comments and remarkably candid on her part to concede that while the official policy so far has been we're blowing up these boats to stop drugs from reaching U.S. shores, that in fact it seems to be regime change. What does that mean? Blowing up boats until Maduro cries uncle. Sounds like regime change to me. The other thing she said that was remarkable is that if and when Trump decides to strike land targets in Venezuela, he would need to go to Congress for a declaration of war. Now, I doubt that Donald Trump was pleased to hear that declaration, because he seems to have a very different point of view when it comes to executive power.
Some people have taken issue with the photos that were included in this piece. I'll put up a post from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He said this on X: it's obvious to most people that Vanity Fair deliberately manipulated pictures and reported statements without context to try and make the White House team look bad. I mean, these photos, they were taken by a photographer named Christopher Anderson. When I went back and looked at his work, this does seem to be like his signature style, from like Margot Robbie to Pharrell Williams. He gets really close up often.
He does. He does get close up, and the key here is that nothing was done. Everybody was fully informed about what was going on here. Not only that the conversations were on the record, but they knew who the photographer was. They even reviewed his portfolio before he went to the White House for Vanity Fair. And that's probably all I should say about it, because my job is to report and write. And you'd really have to ask the editors about that.
But to your knowledge, those photos were not, quote unquote, manipulated.
No. I mean, that's silly. The whole idea. If you look at his portfolio, this is what he does. He does. He's a photojournalist who often does very revealing close-ups.
Chris Whipple, thank you so much. An extraordinary piece of journalism. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Back now with our coverage of the vaccine divide in the U.S. and some concerning new data surrounding whooping cough. According to the CDC, we're now seeing the highest number of cases in a decade. NBC News finding that significant declines in vaccination rates are likely fueling that surge. NBC's Ann Thompson has this report.
Just 2 weeks old, Felina Owens had a cough bigger than she was.
What was it about this cough that made you go, this isn't right?
Just the way she was struggling to breathe and
turning gray blue.
Her parents, Sophie and Justin, would take Felina to 3 doctor and ER visits in Texas before the diagnosis of whooping cough.
I think the longest she would stop breathing was about 11 seconds.
They did tell us that if we didn't bring her in when we did, there is a high possibility she wouldn't have seen the next day.
The disease, a medieval affliction. Since the 1940s, vaccine preventable. Felina's parents and older sister were vaccinated, but Felina, not yet 2 months old, was too young. She was airlifted to Dallas for a month's hospital stay in the NICU.
She was intubated and she had a feeding tube. She was just covered in tubes and wires.
Felina is part of a disturbing healthcare trend. Whooping cough cases quadrupling in Texas this year, numbers topping more than 26,000 nationwide, the highest in more than a decade, with 13 deaths. Now an NBC News investigation reveals dropping vaccination rates are likely fueling the surge. Of the more than 30 states that shared recent whooping cough vaccination data, our analysis found that about 70% of counties and jurisdictions were below the recommended rate for protection, putting millions at risk across the U.S.
We've noticed an increase in children presenting to the emergency room with it. And
Are they vaccinated?
None of the ones I've seen have been.
Dr. Rafael Matamal is a hospital pediatrician in Amarillo.
Is it tougher to fight the disease or the misinformation?
Honestly, the misinformation. When we get into those patterns of rigid belief or orthodoxy based on what we've been exposed to, uprooting that or combating that becomes very difficult.
Felina has now recovered, and her parents still have no idea how she contracted the highly contagious disease.
I've learned that you shouldn't take this as a joke.
You don't know if your child is next. You just don't know.
A lesson this family's learned the hard way.
And Ann Thompson joins us now in studio. So, Ann, given all of the changes we've seen from the federal government as it relates to vaccines, what are the current guidelines for the whooping cough?
So they're still in place as we know them. It's a series of 5 shots beginning at 2 months of age and then a booster in your preteen years. But President Trump just this month issued an order encouraging federal officials to review the childhood vaccine schedule. So these could change the way the hepatitis B recommendations have changed. But it is an incredibly contagious disease, particularly at this time of year when we're all getting together. And so it's very important that you be vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, practice good hygiene because it's spread through the air.
Good advice. NBC's Ann Thompson, thank you. Now to top stories, Global Watch, and an update on that deadly shooting at Bondi Beach. Australian authorities charging the surviving suspect with dozens of offenses, including terrorism and murder. Police say 24-year-old Naveed Akram carried out an ISIS-inspired attack at a Hanukkah celebration alongside his father. The charges comes as the first funerals for some of the victims are now being held under tight security. Torrential rain in Gaza adding to devastation in the enclave, leaving at least 12 people dead. The downpour flooding camps for displaced people and collapsing buildings that were badly damaged from the war. Some parts of Gaza receiving at least 9 inches of rain in the last week. Emergency crews urging people there to avoid damaged buildings, leaving those displaced with very few places to escape the rain. And a stunning prehistoric discovery high in the mountains of Italy. A wildlife photographer stumbled upon one of the oldest and largest known collections of dinosaur footprints, thousands of them. Experts say the prints date back more than 200 million years and span roughly 3 miles. They were found in an Italian national park near one of the Winter Olympic venues. When we come back, the one-of-a-kind Christmas tree farm in Texas that is spreading cheer for children spending their holidays in the hospital. And finally tonight, the Texas hospital spreading Christmas cheer this holiday season. Priscilla Thompson has this one.
Oh, it's so cool.
Eyes all aglow.
Touch his nose.
4-year-old Reagan is on the hunt for the perfect tree at a different kind of Christmas tree farm.
Reagan, look.
Oh.
Inside Texas Children's Hospital, more than 200 hand-decorated kid-sized trees filled with baseballs, butterflies, labubus, even K-pop demon hunters.
What's your favorite song to sing?
Soda Pop. You're my soda pop.
Each young patient can pick a treat that gets delivered to their room, bringing Christmas cheer to kids like Reagan, who will spend their holidays here.
It was nice to have her be able to come out and, pick her own little treat that kind of speaks to her personality.
Have you decided which one is your favorite?
Yes? Let me show you.
You picked this one?
Yeah, you bring it for me?
Yes, I will bring it for you. With that, we loaded the sleigh and we're on our way. Special delivery for Reagan!
Thank you.
Holiday magic.
Thank you, everybody.
For those most in need of a bit of Christmas wonder.
Merry Christmas!
Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, Houston, Texas.
And thank you so much for watching Top Story. For Tom Llamas, I'm Ellison Barber in New York. Stay right there. More news is on the way.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.